Good evening from Rocky Mountain PBS. I'm Cynthia Hessen. This is Colorado State of Mind. A little later in the program, we will talk with reporter Steve Mort about climate change and the Colorado winter resorts, what those important tourist attractions are planning in the face of an expected decrease in annual snowfall in the future. But first, tonight we wrap up our special series, Losing Ground, an 18-month project by the iNews at Rocky Mountain PBS team, which has revealed a steady and startling loss of progress by minority Colorado residents, both economically and socially. This week, we look specifically at the disintegration of families in recent decades and how that has contributed to the problem. In a moment, we're going to talk about it with State Representative Joe Salazar and two members of the iNews team. But let's start with this video by Joe Mahoney of iNews.
Growing up was pretty rough because my mom was also a single mom. You know, she had different men coming and going and, you know, trying to make sure we had a dad and that kind of thing. We lived with my grandfather for the longest time. When he and my mom would fight, then she would, you know, move us into the car or, you know, we'd go somewhere, hotels and stuff. My dad was a gang member, so I started, you know, finding all these, you know, Northsiders, and I was like, do you know Scrappy, you know? And I didn't care about my freedom, you know, I didn't really care about going home because I really didn't feel like I had a home to go to. I mean, I've had the whole chaotic life. I've had the gangs, I've had, you know, the drugs involved, the alcohol involved, the abuse, the everything, you know, and I don't want that for my kids. I don't want my daughter feeling like I felt growing up. I really think that they're gonna have a chance. You know, I really think that by me going through all this struggle and, you know, by me doing all the stuff that I'm doing, they're gonna have more of a chance than I did. 3 minutes to get to the bus stop. You know, and I mean, the gangs and stuff was always gonna be there. You know, that part of life is never gonna go away. You know, it's something that can't be avoided, but at least they'll be able to know what it's like to be on both sides. I mean, I just feel I feel so happy and relieved, and I mean, sometimes I want to just cry, you know, but it's not a sad cry. It's like, I've come this far.
And with us to discuss family disintegration is State Representative Joe Salazar, Democrat of Thornton, who has participated in some of the community outreach around this series, Losing Ground. And of course, we're glad to have the editorial director of iNews at Rocky Mountain PBS, Bert Hubbard, as well as iNews executive director, Laura Frank. So Laura, we just saw Angel Castro, a single mother who comes from a single mother family. Tell us more about her. Does she work? What does she do these days?
Angel's story is typical of many of the stories that are out there. She does have a job. She recently got an improvement in her pay. She's really still struggling. I mean, you saw in the video, she is working to try to coordinate riding a bus to get to a grocery store or get the kids to a doctor. So it really, some of the things that other people might take for granted and being able to do, those simple things in life are a struggle. And that's really what we found as we were looking at the issue of changes in family structure, that even the simplest things become very difficult to do when you're in a poverty situation.
With a single income instead of a double income, obviously. Bert, how did you go about amassing the data on this?
We took a look at 6 decades worth of census data, looking at things like poverty, family income, high school graduation rates, college graduation rates, and home ownership. And what we found was that generally the gaps have just widened since the gains of the civil rights era. And one of the phenomena that a lot of people pointed to was the increase in the number of women-headed households raising kids on their own. I mean, as you just mentioned, the math is that if you have two incomes in a household, you're going to earn more money and you're going to be closer to middle class than if you just have one income. What was interesting was that the reasons for some of these phenomena were so complex. For single-parent households, you had things like incarceration rates of male minorities, especially Black and Latino males. You had phenomena such as welfare, where officials said either that welfare encouraged the creation of single-parent households or that it left them out in the cold, more so because they didn't give them enough benefits. So it was very complex.
Representative Salazar, Joe, I know that you have been keenly interested in this. What do you think about the reason for the disintegration of the family and minority populations? Do you go along with what Bert is saying, people being encouraged to remain single parents because they can get welfare?
I think it's a complex problem. I don't think that it's any one particular factor that has led to the disintegration of families, particularly minority families. You know, in addition to being a legislator, I'm a professor at Metropolitan State College of Denver. I teach a Chicano Studies criminal justice class, and I take a look at economics as part of the whole package of the curriculum. And, you know, welfare, is welfare is what drives poverty? I'm not so certain that that's what drives poverty. Just as I'm not so certain that it's purely education that drives poverty. Just like I'm not so certain that it's single parent households that drives poverty or drives the disintegration. It's the whole package altogether. It's something that we need to take a look at very carefully as legislators to see how can we unpackage this and where can we improve upon things, and also as a community, and particularly Latino community, and I only speak for myself in the Latino community, is what can we do better to help maintain our families and preserve our culture and preserve ourselves as a viable community.
So speaking from the state point of view, you and Representative Angela Williams have crafted some legislation that would set up a commission to look at this?
That's correct. I've been working closely with Representative Williams and looking at a number of disparities in health, in economics, and in education. And the iNews report here was just amazing to us. It shocked us quite a bit that we've actually taken a huge step backwards since the civil rights movement. But we are crafting some legislation now, and hopefully we could bring a bill forward within the next couple of weeks that addresses at least part of the economic disparity, which is there a disparity in the way that state contracts are given out in the community, both in the non-minority and minority communities, and at least that's one start. We do have a health disparity, minority disparity health office now with Department of Public Health and Environment. That bill passed, I believe, a couple of weeks back. So we're starting to craft legislation that reaches into disparity issues.
What would this commission do? Would it study further, or?
That's correct. And so the commission will focus primarily on the way that state money is used with respect to contracting, and how will that affect minority communities. So once we have that study done, then we can move forward possibly next year in looking at legislation to help correct any inequities, if we do find some inequities, and if we need to have some further studies in other areas.
Laura, tell us more about the community outreach. You've had 4 meetings now in various places in the state.
That's right. This is a piece of the journalism that goes beyond just the broadcast or the printing of the Losing Ground series. This gives people an opportunity to come together and talk about what they saw or what they heard or what they read. And so we've had 4 community events so far: Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, Thornton. We're having one on Monday, this coming Monday, March 4th, at the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library. So people could come at 5 o'clock on Monday night and join in on the conversation. And what we've been finding at these events is it's as if people have pent-up desire to really dig into some of these issues and talk about what they've experienced personally over the decades or in recent years, what they think can be done about it, and why it's important. So Joe was at one of those a few weeks back, and it was an interesting interchange of what people were saying and what you were talking about with them. I wonder if maybe you would expand a little bit about what you heard there and what you thought about it.
You know, I think that people were just shocked. I mean, like I said, this iNews report was very shocking to an awful lot of individuals. And we all think that maybe laws or some type of legislation will help fix what's happening here. And I think that what we heard that night is that, no, this goes a little bit deeper than laws and legislation. This goes to some serious inward looking for communities to try to rediscover what it is that's going to make us successful as people. And you know, we did talk about asset, the asset bill, which passed out of committee yesterday, and
to
we did
allow in-state tuition for
undocumented children, right?
Yes.
We also talked about prison issues, such as, and I think I mentioned during that discussion that a Latino male born in 2001, 1 in 6 of those Latino males will serve some time in jail or in prison. And 1 in 2 black males born in 2001 will serve some time in prison. I mean, these disparities are huge. And I think that that was the most shocking thing for everybody is listening to these disparities. No one could come up with what the answer is at that meeting. And I wouldn't expect that at any other meeting anyone's going to come up with the answer. Otherwise, we would have already moved forward on it. But this is engaging discussion that is very vital and important for communities.
Is the community solution a combination of churches and parenting and other organizations? Is that where you see the solution lies?
You betcha. I think it's going to be a combination of things. I think that for the Latino community, we also need to embrace our history. There's an awful lot of, especially young kids, there's an awful lot of young kids who seem to float around out there, not really having a grasp of where we come from, the struggles that we've overcome to get to this point. And there's a little bit of pride that comes along the way of learning about where you've come from, and that we've to this point have overcome some obstacles, but that we have to continue.
I would just add in that one of the things that came up over and over at the public events, Losing Ground public events, where we saw examples of people who had been raised in a single parent family very successfully, a thriving kind of family. So it's not that every single parent family is experiencing the deep poverty, but statistically, most do. So it's really, again, as you were just saying, Joe, it's a combination of issues that result in this growing disparity. And the point is that if we don't address it, if we as an entire society don't address it, it threatens to impact lots of other areas of life. So the state's economy, the future workforce, right. An excellent example. 47% of children under age 1 right now are of color. And within 2 generations, Colorado's entire workforce will be majority minority. We want those folks in the workforce to be as ready for the workforce as they can be. That's something everybody understands is important. So these are big issues with no simple fixes, but the conversation is an important one to start.
Congratulations on this major series, Losing Ground, and we will refer people to the website to learn more about it if you have not seen the previous pieces of Losing Ground. Thank you very much to Representative Joe Salazar, Laura Frank, and Bert Hubbard. Coming up next, a look at what climate change could mean to winter resorts in Colorado. We are getting to the part of the ski season that some people like the best, springtime in the Colorado Rockies. And of course, skiing, snowboarding, and snowmobiling all depend on good snowfall. But the specter of climate change means some uncertainty for the business of winter sports. Tonight, a Steve Mort report on what the industry is anticipating.
For Chris Davenport, skiing is not only a way of life, it's also his livelihood. But for this big mountain skier, both those things are at risk.
We used to have here, I think, a lot more champagne powder, deep, dry powder snow. When we used to have this dependable, consistent, cold powder snow, nowadays you never really know what you're going to get.
Davenport blames climate change for what he describes as shorter, later ski seasons. For some visitors to Aspen Mountain, that change is noticeable. It's peak season here. Tens of thousands of visitors from around the world ski these runs every year. Terry Stevenson has been coming here for 45 years and says her time on the slopes now begins later in the year.
There's a huge difference. You go up the mountain at the beginning of the season and it was bare. Everything that didn't have snowmaking on was bare, totally. And it's very sad when you see that.
It's not just the ski resort operators who stand to lose out if snowfall totals dwindle. Some small local businesses here in Aspen fear for the future if the ski season becomes shorter. Dan McMahon owns the Incline Ski and Board Shop. He says a lack of snow on local mountains means fewer equipment rentals.
I could confidently say, it's thousands of dollars for sure that it costs us, and that's not even counting the broken skis. Last year we had a lot of broken skis, and that just happens on a low snow year.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says last winter was the 4th warmest on record for the U.S. Aspen reported only 50% of its average snowpack. While there are concerns here that rising temperatures could have an impact on the winter sports industry in Colorado, experts say that the experience of some resorts in the Northeast could prove to be a harbinger of things to come here. Corey Smith runs the small Campton ski area in New Hampshire. He aims to have his community ski hill open for only a month each season, but is now struggling even to achieve that.
All of a sudden you'll get a big storm that'll come up the coast, a nor'easter, and what used to, I think what used to probably be a lot more snow, now half the time ends up being heavy rain.
Yeah, I think this switch right here is just giving me trouble.
Because of low snowfall, Campton failed to open its doors at all last year. The scale of the impact of climate change on the winter sports industry is a matter of debate and varies across the country. Scientists like Elizabeth Borokowski say Colorado is among the states that have escaped the worst so far, but say the long-term outlook is bleak.
What we've already seen, especially in the Northeast and the Midwest, are really strong winter warming trends. The warming trends haven't been quite as strong at the higher elevation locations like Colorado, Montana, and the Pacific Northwest. Nonetheless, we are expecting that temperatures are going to continue to rise into the future, and that spells trouble for our ski industry. Visits to ski resorts were down 15% nationwide in 2012, but despite recent low snow totals, Colorado Ski Country USA, an industry group, says visitors to Colorado's ski destinations have remained fairly constant, between 11 and 12 million annually over the last 10 years. To keep it that way, large operators like Aspen Skiing Company frequently turn to snowmaking to make up for a shortage of natural snow. Aspen pumps as much as 6,000 gallons of water a minute while making snow for its 4 mountains and uses as much power as a small town to do it, and all that to cover just 10% of its terrain. Auden Schendler, Vice President of Sustainability at Aspen Skiing Company, says longer-term solutions are needed too. He's critical of his own industry's efforts to tackle the issue of climate change.
The way to solve the problem is to mobilize this whole industry, which is sexy, it's big, it has celebrities who are as famous as anyone in Hollywood. Use that as a club to drive change on policy, and the trade groups have been very reluctant to do that. They've done it at a limited level, but they haven't really said this is our #1 priority. The industry itself is at stake and we need to move.
The National Ski Areas Association says resorts nationwide are helping raise awareness of the issues facing the industry. For its part, Aspen Skiing Company says it's leading by example, taking steps to reduce its own greenhouse gas emissions.
We've got our own internal climate plan. We're going to be carbon neutral and reduce our emissions and all those types of things. But really, honestly, the most important thing we're doing is we're trying to use our platform where a lot of people come to Aspen from around the world to convene, and we're trying to use that platform to tell people climate change is real, it's happening, and we collectively need to do something about it as a society. How you guys doing?
While this season is looking better than the last for Colorado's ski areas, there's still a sense of unease in the high country. While skiing now may be good, no one here is willing to predict what 2014 might bring, leaving a cloud of uncertainty hanging over Aspen and other towns dependent on regular winter snow. For Colorado State of Mind, I'm Steve Mort in Aspen.
And now Steve Mort in Denver, here on the set of Colorado State of Mind. And this was a report that you did, worked on for the NewsHour as well as for us. I guess I heard two things there. Auden Schindler saying nobody's paying enough attention, but then some other people saying, yes, we are. We're planning for it. What were you left with an impression of?
Well, what I was left the impression of was that this is a really big deal for the ski industry. You know, the ski industry in the United States is worth $10.7 billion annually. And it employs about 187,000 people in 38 states. And as we know, Colorado is one of the largest ski destinations, not only in the nation, but also in the world as well. And one of the big statistics that the industry will point to is the difference in revenue between a good and a bad ski or bad snow year. In a good snow year, you're going to earn, across the industry in the United States, $1 billion more than you will in a bad year. And that's a really big deal when it comes to economic impact.
Yes.
The 187,000 people employed are direct and indirect, so a lot of industries are dependent upon the ski industry doing well, hospitality, that kind of thing. So when there's a $1 billion shortfall in revenues, that makes a huge difference not only to the ski industry, but across the board. Now, you know, some will say, hey, it's not quite as bad as it seems. And the reason for that is, you know, while, say, Vail, for example, had a 12% decline in visitors last year, which was a notoriously bad snow year, if you talk to Colorado Ski Country USA, their members, which I believe exclude Vail, but their members, or their visitor numbers to their member resorts, have basically remained constant over the last 10 years. So between 2002 and 2012, visitors to their member resorts have been somewhere between 6 and 7 million per year. There was a downturn during the economic slump that we saw kind of 2006, 2007, but now they're pretty much back to where they were in 2002. And nationally, in fact, the National Ski Areas Association tell us that, hey, our visitor numbers basically haven't changed since 1979. You know, it's pretty much remained the same. But what we're saying, what we're hearing from the industry is we're getting bigger variations now. If you look at the average, there's not much difference. But year on year, you know, that's where we see the problems.
How did they try and balance that out, those ups and downs?
Well, there's a couple of ways that they try to do that. Firstly, we're told by a lot of these companies that they're trying to get their own house in order first, sort of lead by example, that kind of thing. Aspen says it's trying to sort of use the bully pulpit, if you like, to try to get you know, people to listen to them. They're a big influential company in Colorado.
And Auden Schindler certainly has a national reputation.
That's right, nationally as well. But one of the other ways they do it, and the more obvious and visible way they do it, is via snowmaking.
But I was going to ask, so why isn't snowmaking just the total answer then?
Well, there are various reasons. It's very expensive, it takes a lot of energy, and also a lot of water. And water is a big issue, as we know, here in the West. So the problem with that is it's very expensive. A lot of the smaller resorts cannot afford these high-tech guns, which can cost millions of dollars to equip a slope with these things. And you know, it doesn't by any means cover the whole terrain. And the other problem is, with a lot of skiers will tell you, is that it's just simply not as good as the real stuff. In Colorado,
I do know that. I was being disingenuous when I asked that.
In Colorado, skiers are used to the champagne powder, that light, fluffy, almost dry snow, which has got a lot of air in it. And that's not how artificial snow looks or feels. It's a much denser, wetter snow, and therefore a lot of skiers say it's kind of inferior to ski on.
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you to your NewsHour colleagues. A very interesting report. And that is Colorado State of Mind for this weekend. You may see this program again or any of our programs at video.rmpbs.org. Next week, we turn our attention to K-12 education in Colorado, and specifically the changes that are being contemplated in the funding of K-12 education. Hope you'll join us for that, and thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm Cynthia Hessen. Good night.
All of these resorts are trying to become four-season resorts, so they're less dependent upon climate, they're less dependent upon snow falling during that key period. And you know, one of the ways they're doing that, a lot of these places, is they're trying to sort of introduce other things to keep people coming. Obviously people come to Colorado all year round for various reasons, but they wanted them to keep coming to their resorts. So they're bringing in things like spas, art shows, water parks, all kinds of different things to try to make themselves all-round attractions for the whole year. And one of the bright spots in Colorado has been hospitality. It's been fairly consistently good business.